Good evening, everyone. How we doing? You can do better than that. Good evening. How we doing? All right. Thank you so much for being here on a Monday night. Welcome. My name is Eric Hintz, and welcome to the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. I'm the interim director of the Lemelson Center for the Study of Invention and Innovation here at the museum. And on behalf of the center, welcome to our Innovative Lives program featuring Gary Brantley, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of the National Football League, in conversation with moderator Dan Kaufman, Managing Editor for Sports Technology at the Sports Business Journal. For those in our audience who may be joining us for the first time, the Lemelson Center is the Smithsonian's leader in studying the history of innovation and encouraging inventive creativity among our visitors. The Lemelson Center sponsors research fellowships, collects archival material, produces exhibitions, and hosts educational programs like this one. Please check out our website, invention.si.edu, and our social media feeds for more information. Prior to tonight's conversation, we hope you enjoyed seeing some football-themed artifacts and archival materials from the museum's collections. We hope you also took some time to explore our new exhibition called Change Your Game, which opened earlier this year in March, thanks to the generous support of our partners, including the United States Patent and Trademark Office, the National Science Foundation, Nike, and the Lemelson Foundation. The 3,500 square foot, family-friendly interactive exhibition explores the dynamic role of invention and technology in sports. It asks, who invents for sports and why? And how can we be inspired to discover and nurture our own creative identity? The bilingual exhibition showcases approximately 60 sports technology artifacts and highlights the motivations and practices of diverse inventors who have developed advanced swimsuits, adaptive sports wheelchairs, protective helmets, instant replay, the jog bra, and many other technologies. The exhibition invites visitors, especially young people, to see themselves as inventive problem solvers who can become game changers in their own lives. To extend those ideas, the Lemelson Center has dedicated this year's Innovative Lives speaker series to exploring invention and technology in sports. So, our Innovative Lives series presents a unique opportunity for our visitors to meet and learn from contemporary inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. By convening these informal conversations, we demystify what it means to be an innovator. We invite our guests to share their stories from their lives and careers, including key inspirations, successes and failures, and their reflections on the creative process. Before I introduce tonight's moderator, I have a few quick housekeeping notes. Please hold all questions until the end of the moderated discussion. Our team will be passing around microphones during the Q&A, and you can address those questions directly to our panelists. The program is designed for all ages. We thank you for following the Smithsonian Code of Conduct, which outlines civil and respectful engagement from all of us throughout the live program. The program is being recorded and will be available to watch on our website and YouTube channel in just a few weeks. And of course, please check to make sure your cell phones are silenced during the discussion. So, without further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dan Kaufman, who in turn will introduce our guest, Gary Brantley. Our friend, Dan Kaufman, is trained as an attorney, and early in his career, he negotiated collective bargaining agreements for the Major League Baseball umpires and NBA referee unions. He also managed business and legal affairs at a sports and entertainment agency and litigated the case that was the basis for the movie The Social Network. He subsequently co-founded and managed Ballingy Group, an athlete management and marketing agency. He later taught sports law, contracts, and negotiation at Georgetown University. Our team first met Dan when he was at Sport Techie, a very cool industry events team and website that reported on the latest developments in sports and technology. Dan helped lead the growth of Sport Techie until it was acquired by Leaders Group Sports, the parent company for Sports Business Journal, where he now serves as managing editor for Sports Technology. Dan served on the advisory committee that helped us develop the Change Your Game exhibition, and we're delighted to welcome him back to the museum to moderate tonight's discussion. So please help me welcome Dan Kaufman and Gary Brantley.
Wow, thank you very much, Eric. Geez, this is not about me tonight. This is about this man, but that was very, very nice. I do want to say thank you to everyone from the Lemelson Center, Eric, Emma, and everyone involved. I was so lucky to be involved from the beginning when they started considering what a sports and invention exhibit should look like in the museum here, and the results of that are right over there, and it's fantastic. Please make sure you walk through that and check it out and bring your kids to come and see it. So thank you very much for being here, everyone. I'm going to get through all of Gary's life here pretty much in a minute, so I'm not going to go through the whole bio first, but I'm going to start by doing this. First of all, a comment. I've been to a few Innovative Lives events before, and they always had it flipped. They used to have the presentation like this and then the drinks. Now we've got the drinks first, so I hope everyone is ready to really get talking, so it'll be exciting. And we'll do Q&A in about 40 minutes or so. How many people here have heard of the NFL? Raise your hand. All right, great. What's amazing to me is the NFL is so big, the biggest sports league, I'm going to say, and I think many people will say, billion-dollar industry, and we have on stage right now, understand this, the person who is in charge of all technology and information for that global sports league, Gary Brantley. A round of applause for Gary. It's a big job. But we'll start by going back and understanding how Gary got there. So we'll go back to Youngstown, Ohio, where you grew up.
Yep.
And the question I'm going to ask to get the conversation going is, at what point during your childhood, if ever, did you realize that you had an interest either in inventing, in being creative, in being an engineer, being a technologist?
Well, first, let's talk about the fact that you didn't tell me you were an attorney.
Oh, geez.
All right, so let's start there. I mean,
Former.
I'm sitting here listening to all of this, and I'm like, who is this guy? But you know, ultimately, so in growing up, my family and we didn't own any computers at all. I actually took a course in high school at the time, and it was really the only thing that captured my attention. So I wasn't necessarily the greatest student, but once I figured out the pathway to learning, which was visualization and engagement, it really became a focus for me. So I would say early on, my grandmother had a computer. It was like a Commodore 64, this old Apple computer that she would always call me to fix, even though I never fixed it. Right? And so that is kind of how we got really tied to, or myself really got tied to really just a huge interest in computers. And you know, and I would like to say, my dad is a professional drummer and was a professional drummer. So music really was like the core foundation of our family. And so I took that on and did a lot of professional gigs like really early on, like as a teenager.
You were a drummer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, one day we were sitting at dinner, I think it was 16 years old, and I was like, hey, this doesn't pay. Like, I wasn't being funny, but I was like, this is not.
That came out of your mouth, not out of your daddy's mom's mouth.
No,
okay.
but it literally, he almost threw me across the table.
Oh.
But it was an interesting conversation because I really told him that I wanted to kind of change my focus from playing to really start to focus on my career and what I would do later. And technology, actually it was aeronautical engineering was first.
Interesting.
And I figured out that the grades weren't necessarily there to move forward on that.
But why aeronautical engineering? Was it because you saw spaceships and airplanes and you were like, that's cool, I want to learn about that?
Yes, I was fascinated with how they were created. And I had an opportunity, ironically, to go to museums like this on field trips in school, and you kind of never know what a kid is looking at when he goes through here. And so it just caught my attention. I was captivated by it. And I couldn't figure out what school to get in to go through with it. But then when I saw what the requirements were, I just moved on.
Was there, you mentioned your dad, you mentioned your grandma, was there someone you could point to as a mentor as a kid that really helped you along the way?
I really didn't. It was really, honestly, really my dad, and I'll talk about the person that gave me really my first opportunity and how it changed into what I'm doing today. So, when I look at mentors, I look at values, ethics, hard work. It wasn't necessarily around technology. And so my dad literally had all of those like attributes, and even to this day, he still has them. And so that was something that I always admired and looked up to. But at the end of the day, I went to college, right? And so I was in college, and I was playing basketball in college. And what ended up happening is there was a person who went to my church who was an executive at IBM. And he said, we have a big blue program, and if your grades are good enough, you can get in that program. Now, I had decent grades in high school, but I was on the dean's list my freshman year in college.
Okay.
And so that's how and I was the least qualified person to be in that program. All these kids, there were 60 kids in that program. And we went through the entire summer of that program. And at the end of that program, I was the only kid they asked to stay. So I was 19 years old at that time. And it's interesting because I literally had no computer skills at all. And so then I started to figure out what people look at and what they value. And so they looked at my acceleration to really understanding this stuff without really knowing it. They also looked at, I would stay later than everyone else. I would get there before everyone else. And so at 18 years old, to tell you a little bit of this, between 18 and 19, IBM hired me full time, and I was making like $60,000 a year. And I thought that I was like...
And you're in school also at this time too?
I'm in school also at this time.
Full-time student, full-time employee?
Yep.
Okay.
And so I would literally, I believe at that time I was making more money than my dad. And we would laugh, and it was just very interesting, because that is kind of how my career and pathway started into this. And so in going through that, IBM, I'm in Atlanta now, between Atlanta and New York, and ultimately IBM was moving everyone to Atlanta, and I said no. So does everybody remember these chat rooms like in Yahoo? I see some people in here. I know you remember. And I'm looking, right? And so I was in a chat room with an executive, and I know some of you all remember this company, MCI WorldCom. Right? Yeah. Like you got your long distance code that you could call. And ultimately, there was an executive who couldn't fix a problem. From the skills I gained at IBM, I fixed his problem in a chat room. And I didn't have to move to Atlanta because he offered me a job at MCI. And that job had remote capabilities tied to it as well. So I literally didn't apply. He offered me a job. And
You fixed something that he was trying to fix and he couldn't fix?
He couldn't fix it. So
Can you tell us more details on what that was?
Yeah, so from a programming perspective, he was actually trying to figure out how to write a piece of code. Yeah. To fix an engineering problem around a Rockwell automation dialer. And so he couldn't figure it out. The people at MCI couldn't figure it out. And so he just threw it in a chat room. I saw it and I said, oh, this is easy. Just boo, 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 and you're done. And he came back to me and said, you figured out something in 5 minutes that we've been trying to figure out for almost 6 months. And so he said, come down, you're hired if you want the job. And at that time, it was something that I was weighing, because when IBM moved, I was still in college. Yeah. So I couldn't move. My education was
college in Youngstown, right?
College in Youngstown, yeah. And so that's really how I got started. They hired me as a network engineer. Wow. And I just
working remotely,
and then I would go into the office sometimes, because they had, if you were in a certain mile radius of an office, you could go in. Yeah. And that's really how my career just continued to blossom.
Did you think of yourself at the time as like I'm going to be an engineer, or even like I'm an inventor, I'm an innovator? Did that cross your mind?
No, I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
You know, that's the interesting part is my education and evolution. And I tell kids all of this stuff all the time. Like, it's hard to become what you don't know exists, right? So then you go through these you don't really have anything to shoot for. So I was learning what existed through the process of being employed.
Yeah.
And so I was just steadily moving through the ranks. And I remember sitting under a desk. I was fixing somebody's computer and I was under their desk. And if anybody knows, when you go under a person's desk, it's dust bunnies, it's their shoes are down there, right? And so I got under the desk, I was fixing it. And I remember I got up from the desk and I wish the lady was around. I think she passed, who I said something to. I said, ma'am, who's telling me to do this? Like, I didn't even know what a CIO was.
Yeah.
And so I started researching. The internet wasn't as robust as it is today, right? So you didn't have that type of knowledge. And I said, that's the guy that's telling me what to do. And I was like, I'm never getting up under here again. Like, this is like whatever I got to do to get out of this, I fixed enough stuff. Like, now I want to tell other people to do that, right?
Man.
And so I started researching what a chief information officer was.
Yep.
And you would be surprised. I go to high schools and I speak to kids, and I promise you, especially in the inner city, you ask them what a chief information officer is, I can tell you almost 80% of the room is not gonna know at all. And that was always interesting to me, which then, when MCI had their issues, it led me into education and creation. And so at that particular time, I created a website on my own called The Faith Spot.
And give us, what year was this?
This was, oh man, you're dating me now. This was early, this was probably 98.
98, okay.
1998.
The Faith Spot?
It's called The Faith Spot. It's called The Faith Spot. And if you dig hard enough, you'll see there's articles written about it. But it was the first Christian-based. Well, it was at the time when MySpace was out, so I was competing with them, but we had, my brother's an attorney, ironically, but we had over about 1 million users on that site.
No way.
And so we had gospel artists who were tied to that site, and we were like literally streaming concerts and content, and people were paying. So we were like way in front of this, way in front of it.
Yep.
And it just got to the point where the users started complaining about my inability to keep up. And I was like,
didn't have the bandwidth to
didn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
It was just me. I was walking out of work trying to fix issues, literally on my laptop. And finally, I was like, we just sold it, right?
Yep.
Sold today, like the email addresses, the source code, and all those things. And so I kind of got out of it. But that was like my biggest. I was really proud of that because the creation was really at the time before social media really took off.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt. And you coded the whole thing yourself?
Entirely. And I had absolutely no help.
And you never took a computer coding class, you just taught yourself?
No, I took it in college. I took them in college, but ultimately it's a complete, it's different because at that time the coding language was PHP.
Yep.
And PHP at that time was a new type of coding language that really wasn't taught in college. So, this is why your fundamentals matter: math, science, logic. It teaches you how to create. So,
All right, so then take us from there, from selling that website. The next step in your journey is where? Is that when you jump into public sector work?
Yeah, no, so it starts. So basically I was like, hey, all right, I had a business, right? I started a business, a computer business, and I said, I am going to just focus on this, and I'm gonna get a job in a school district. Because I get my summers off, I'm done at 3, and I was like the biggest misconception of it all, right? And it was.
Any teachers out there? School? Come on now. Yeah.
It was. I literally thought it would give me the time. And I can tell you today, after being a CIO in one of the largest school districts in the country, it was the most complex, complicated job that I've ever had in my life. And it was at a time.
This was in Georgia?
This was in Georgia.
Okay.
And it was at the time when people were when computers and chalkboards were going away and laptops were coming in the classroom and teachers had grade books and they had to become digital and unions and all these different things. And so I was like, this job is crazy. And, going through that process, and this is what I tell people, I fell in love with kids. I fell in love with those who didn't have. And so I had to convince a board to spend $75 million on inner city kids in an inner city community with kids who did not have much. And that process and the complexity around getting those dollars for that when people didn't think they would take care of it is probably it's more rewarding than this.
Yeah.
And I stayed there and got talked about for staying there.
And you were successful in convincing that board.
Successful. They said they're not going to take care of them. They're going to destroy them. They're going to be stolen. And this program is still going today.
Wow.
And it's called Digital Dreamers. Yeah.
Where is it? DeKalb County?
Yeah, it's DeKalb County, yeah. And so there were, at that time, there were like 120,000 kids we gave laptops to who did not have them. This was in 2015, 16. So before, it's the norm kind of today, but it wasn't the norm back then.
Yeah.
And those kids took care of those laptops like it was the best thing on earth because it was valuable to them.
Yeah.
Right? And I always tell people that if it's valuable, kids that have, it's not valuable.
Take it for granted.
Yes, you take it for granted. And they took care, those laptops changed lives. It created access. It created kids in kindergarten and second grade and first grade learning Mandarin. It had teachers coming over from China in work study programs. It created relationships for kids in the inner city with kids in Indonesia and all these different places. And so it was, I fell in love with it. And so I stayed, and I didn't want to leave until I felt like the work was done.
You were there for 7-8 years or so?
The longest place I've been in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting as you're talking through these things, and we talked about coding, and we talked about learn about engineering and technology, and then in this instance, though, we're really talking about a skill set of convincing, like taking a bunch of information and convincing a group of people how to do things effectively. And I think that's interesting as we get closer to your role with the NFL to think about the different skill sets that you have to have.
Yeah, I think, some lady told me, and I talk about this, and I promise you I'm not selling this, but it's just a part of a book that I wrote. I talk about...
Go ahead, tell them the title of the book.
No, it's the art. It's the art. It's the art of organizational transformation, and it doesn't talk about tech. It talks about how you influence people around really highly complex transformational types of opportunities in business. And this lady said to me, and I write in the book, she said, "You only get this stuff done because you have charisma." And I was like, man, what is that? I was offended, actually.
But you do have charisma. But you got a lot more than that.
So I looked it up. And so when I went to look it up, I was like, man, this isn't that bad. Right? I was like, I don't think she really kind of understood. I think she kind of gave me a compliment. And so, I talk about that and your ability to influence in business, and your ability to politically navigate environments is your biggest skill set that you can have, because you get into places. If I walk into any of you all today and I say, hey, I need every single one of you all to invest $500, and I have to tell you why and how and get you to believe in something, not from a con perspective, but get you to believe in something and get you to take that on personally, is a very hard thing to do. It is not easy. And I tell people, you get in business and then you start to have a skill set like being a network engineer, and you become a you become a salesperson. And that's even for your teacher. If any of you are in college and you're with a professor and you're trying to get your grade changed, or you want to tell, you literally have to influence them and get them to believe that, number one, you are authentic about what you're saying. Number two, you actually know what you're saying. And number three, hey, I've seen you put in the work for me to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's a hard thing to do. And the higher you go in organizations, the better you have to be at it. Because you won't get anything done because everybody has their opinions on it. And so bringing people together in one lane to transform under complexity is a very, very, very hard thing to do. It's not the tech. Tech and computers don't talk back. They don't tell you we're not doing it. The most they'll do is beep and shut down, right? That's it. So there's the tech part is easy. People change every day, and one of the things I started to focus on really early on in my career, I was a CIO at 28, right? 28. And I cried a lot of times. I was a kid. I was like, I can't believe people are so mean, right? And so then my life's work became, from a career perspective, study people, learn people. People are constantly changing, and you'll never really get to the bottom of how to master them, but you can keep up with the rapid pace of change. People are different today than they were yesterday. They've consumed so much more information. They have so many more areas and vehicles to receive that information. And so ultimately, I became obsessed with it, like really learning how to navigate people, individuals, in complexity. And that's how I fell in love with transformation.
Well, we're foreshadowing a little bit with the book because I want you to later tell a story about how that book got you the job at the NFL in a way, right?
Yeah.
But let's go to your role with the City of Atlanta. Talk me through that, because you were telling me a little bit beforehand, and it was fascinating. 2 years with the City of Atlanta, and start from the beginning and tell us what you had to accomplish when you got there. Yeah,
so the first thing about it was, I was ready to leave the school district. I was like, okay, this has been great, time to make some money. And now I gotta figure out how to get people to understand that I'm not a government guy. And I wanna tell you, they'll pigeonhole you. I remember having conversations with recruiters today who are still talking to me today, and I have to remind them, you told me I would never, ever get out of this space. You said, so, I think the biggest thing is you can't listen to people define you, right? You can do, and then you have to look at, I thought that I was the most diverse. I said, if I'm in manufacturing, if I want a job in manufacturing, and you want more of the same, then go hire a manufacturing guy, right? But if you want somebody that looks at things differently and has been through diversified experiences and you want something different, then you're gonna get me. You got enough manufacturing people here. You don't need a resident expert in technology that's a CIO that knows manufacturing. Because the people who are working on my team know it. They've been there for years. And it's the same for anything else. And so I would tell you, never let people define you, because they will define you quickly and tell you what you can and can't do. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna work my way out. So I worked my way into situations and moments that I prepared for. So the city of Atlanta had this huge cyber attack. Right? It was all over the news. You can go, it was the biggest embarrassment. 2017 time, right? Biggest embarrassment probably in the history of definitely the city of Atlanta, but the city of Atlanta was like a case study for, not just in the US, but outside the US of this is what you don't do, right? And so I did that, and I went through that journey. And so the mayor, I got a call from the mayor's office, said, hey, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms was in that role 2 months, and the entire city of Atlanta was using pen and paper. This is the entire city of Atlanta. And I'm really telling you, pen and paper. They would walk in and say, how can I help you? And tablets, no computers worked, the processes were broken. The only thing that survived that was the airport. And there was a lot of reasons as to why. But ultimately, it was a disaster. And so I got called. I said, hey, I will do this in 3 years. It took 2 years. And it was a situation where complexity, again, was there. And people said, why would you go take that job? My mom even said, what are you doing? That's the worst thing you could do. And I said, actually, look at it differently. I was like, the bar is low. They're using pen and paper, right? I was like, and so she was like, yeah. I was like, if I fix 5 computers, I've done something, right? So think about this, like sports. Think about Deion Sanders. Think about where he's at. He's at Colorado. He's like, they won 1 game. I can definitely win 2, right? like this is like, and so that was my thought process too. And then I said, government entities are always fighting, but this is a one time that they're on the same page, because the city council is on the same page, the mayor. We need this fixed, and guess what? We're going to give you all the money that you need to get it fixed. Now, how many of you all have ever heard a mayor run on tech? It's never, right? It's a hard, they're running on fixing potholes, crime, right? And so typically when you go there, the IT department is the one that gets the least amount of money. And so this was an opportunity for me to just say, I want that, I want that, I want that. And they all said here, 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 here. And so 2 years in, it stopped. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it went back to government. But in 2 years, it was fixed. And when I say fixed, like really, really fixed, the goal was to put them in a situation where they would be able to, it was like long-lasting change, transform this entire environment, that if someone even came in after me, it would take them years to break it, because the processes and the culture has changed. And I don't know if any of you all have ever been a part of a cyber attack, but if you're in an IT department and you have a cyber attack, what do you think the people in operations are saying about the IT department? They stink, right? And so it was a demoralizing, so I had to work not only on systems, I had to build confidence back not only in the employees there, who they were blaming, but also I had to build confidence into the organization so that we can move forward. So that's kind of how that happened, and we'll talk about it later, but then there was one important event when I took that job that was coming, and it was the Super Bowl. And the NFL had, what most people don't know, when we prepare for Super Bowls, there's an extensive amount of work done with cities years ahead of time.
Because the NFL runs the Super Bowl, right? Like
yes.
Teams, all their regular season games, team side runs most of that stuff. But when it comes to the Super Bowl,
well, so this is, I thought that too. I did till I got there. So I think the interesting part is this: the NFL likes equity and parity. So imagine if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, and you're playing in Pittsburgh. You do not want the Pittsburgh Steelers running the technology for the Cleveland Browns, right? So because then it's not working, things are happening, and you get the blame game, right? And so ultimately there's a system set up to whereas the NFL runs that technology during those games. Now anything outside of that, events, concerts, et cetera, they do that. But the game, we run the technology. We keep it equitable and fair so that you don't have one person trying to get an advantage on tablets and all those types of things.
Got it.
And that's where that comes in. But yes, we run the games and also the Super Bowl. So there's 2 games tonight. And this was more important for me, so I'm here. It really is. Like I love talking to this. Yeah, this is really cool. And so, my team will run that technology. So they were giving me updates before I came on stage when I was looking at my phone.
We're jumping ahead a little bit, but when you say that technology, what do you mean? Tell us that.
Yes.
For example, if someone goes home and they watch the rest of the game tonight, what might they see that you're in charge of?
So yes, most people don't know, and I'll start with the unobvious, that there are chips in the shoulder pads, computer chips in the shoulder pads. There are, in some cases, if you opt in, computer chips in the mouthpieces. There are computer chips in the football. And there's a ton of technology that sits inside of the perimeter of the field. So you have tablets on the sideline, You have coach-to-coach technology, which means the coaches are talking to each other both on the sideline and up in the players' booth. And you have coach-to-player technology. And coach-to-player technology, meaning that the coach can talk to the player inside of their helmet, and there's technology in there that allows them to communicate, on both on offense and on defense. If you go a little bit further, there's, of course, the infrastructure, the fiber, the servers that run all of that. There's a ton of frequencies and things that you have to be able to kind of dispel, because you have a ton of wireless frequencies from cell phones to everything else to make sure the communication is clear. So there's absolutely no room for error. And then you get to the coaches, you get to the booths, right? You have medical replay equipment. You have coaches that have tablets in those booths. Just so you know, we control when the plays actually are loaded. So, 30 minutes before the game, those tablets are blank. And so when they come up, we load their information on those. You have replay technology that goes from each stadium back to New York. And also a new replay center that we haven't talked much about, but that's actually in New Jersey as well, that the team is working in. So there's a ton of technology that's just on the field. And a lot of people don't know there are doctors and medical assistants who don't really watch the game. They watch specific players. So you may see a player get pulled out. That's because what you don't see televised, they are actually looking at that player staggering and et cetera. So they may just say, pull them out. We need to get them checked. And so it's so many different aspects of it. And then you look at the optical type of technology and cameras that we're putting in place that allow the replay center to see all these amazing angles. And so that's in every single stadium. And so that's just not here. When we go abroad, Brazil, we go into these stadiums that are not in really good shape. And if anybody's in here played in the NFL, they expect the same type of atmosphere that they get in the U.S. abroad. And that takes a lot of work. And sometimes that's 7 days before a game. Because there could be a soccer game happening and they let us in and we work day and night to bring you that on television and tie all of that to your broadcasters, whether it's games coming on Netflix this year, whether it's games coming on Amazon. All of that infrastructure is integrated and allows for all of that information to flow back to us. NextGen Stats, I know a lot of you have heard about that. You can tell how fast a player's running. That's because it's chips in the shoulder pads in the ball. You can tell how fast they threw the ball. All those things really help define the technology component. And then you have all of the infrastructure that allows you to use your phones and your tablets and to bet and stats. And so my team has their hand in all of that. And of course, if the game is an NFL Network game, there are guys on my team that are running that game because that's our network that we own, and that technology is something that it's like our game. So you'll see, like in London, it was a NFL Network game. And so there's just so much technology as things that are coming, AR, VR, getting people closer to the game. We want you closer to the game. We want you to experience the game differently. Has anybody seen the Toy Story simulcast? And if you haven't, you seen it?
Yeah, of course.
Seen it?
Fantastic.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's through work with Beyond Sport, right? Which is Sony. So it's a simulcast of a live football game, but with Toy Story-based animations in real time. So think of next generation experience, fan experience for a younger audience to both have the adults maybe experiencing the real thing and then the kids experiencing the simulcast.
But the funniest thing is, to your point, the adults were watching that.
It was great.
It was great.
Like, I mean, I love Toy Story too, so maybe.
I was like, what is it? And it's literally, when I talked about the chips and the shoulder pads and the chips and the football, that is what brings that to life. So while we are working with Beyond Sports, it has to take what's happening on the field from a technology perspective and then bring it to life. And so we're doing more of that. This year for Dallas and Cincinnati, it'll be The Simpsons. And so we're working through that, and that's an educational moment as well. And so just one last piece of it, my team also, they control the stats, but we open and close the bets on our end. So it's a ton of work. It's exciting work, and I'm probably working for one of the most forward-thinking, innovative organizations out there, with a huge global strategy and a focus on women now with flag football for LA 28. And also, my mind is just spinning. Our referees are piloting watches that will allow them to, if the play clock goes to zero, their wrist will buzz, so they can keep their eyes like on the game where it kind of matters most.
Yep.
And so it's just so much coming in 2025. We'll have technology that's not for 2025, but for 2026. But for 2025, we'll be measuring the first downs just through technology.
Yep.
On the field, so those guys walking
Without
out with the
chains.
chains. Yeah. Now that's an emotional connection.
Yeah.
We got to work on. All right.
No doubt.
Because some of y'all like to see those guys
Move
run
the
out
chains.
with that.
We can't say move the chains anymore.
Right. Even if it's not as accurate. They say move the change, and so we're working on that and to bring this animated display both in the stadium and on TV. So it's just it's a lot of exciting things coming in 2025.
I've got two more questions for you, and then we'll open it up to the group. One of the questions is, as I've been listening to you talk, I've kind of formulated this question, and it's that I think the presumption is that when you think about state government or local government, and then you think about a huge organization like the NFL, you think, oh, it's this bureaucracy, it's like so many different things that are moving around, and that's so hard for someone to come in and be inventive and be innovative.
Yep.
Tell me why that's not true, or tell me how you were able to tackle that both in government and then now at the NFL.
Yeah, it's and we touched on it a little bit earlier, it's influence. It's the ability to collaborate and work with different mindsets. It's a respect thing that you have to gain over time. I think a lot of it is listening, and I think making people feel inclusive. I think inside of the NFL, which I'm extremely proud of, I think the IT department probably has the most diverse set of individuals and groups. We just hired a new IT vice president of football technology. It's a woman. The first time a woman has ever run that department. This is cool, yeah. And I just think ultimately when you're looking at it from that perspective, there's a lot of parts and pieces, but you got to really be in love with learning people, and you have to really be humble, right? And you have to understand and know when you're wrong. And you have to be able to communicate when you're wrong and tell people you're wrong, and it's okay. And I think you also have to take a few punches in the face, but understand you got to get back up and you got to keep moving. And that's been the story of my life, is people telling me I can't. And I'm like, over the years I started to figure out what you say doesn't even matter. It's really what I believe. And there is no way, this lady that I hired has no football background. None at all. She doesn't even know anything about the game. This is the interesting part, right? But she is the most advanced. I'll tell you this, she has 15 patents that she's filed for, and she has 5.
Wow.
She is absolutely amazing. She knows tech, she understands people, and I think people have to, if it's one thing I want the audience to get out of this, do not let people pigeonhole you into something that they feel is right for you. If you believe in it, work to get it. Work to get it, because I never thought that I would be sitting at a pool in Phoenix, and we talked about this earlier, and I'm getting a call from the NFL. And I was like, what? Right? And so normally I would take 2-3 days to call back. I call back probably in 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, what y'all want? Right? And so they were like, hey, we want you we want to talk to you for a chief information officer position. We've been looking since January. We've interviewed 16, 17
This
people.
was July, right?
Yeah. And I got a call in July and went through this entire process alone. And I think I never even knew the job was open. Ever. Like it wasn't, those aren't jobs they just put online, right? And so I think ultimately it's the seeds that you plant early on in life. I never worked, literally really never worked for money. I just had a passion about it, and I always tried to do good work and do my best. And somehow someone saw that during the Super Bowl as well. And I think, I always tell people too, you get 3 in life, and I tell kids this, you'll get at least 3 or 4 opportunities. I promise you will. And the question is are you prepared for them? They may not necessarily be the opportunities that are your end goal at the time, but I got one. Let's go back to where we first started. I got a call for a job, an internship at IBM, right? If my grades weren't where they needed to be, I would have never gotten that job, right? And then you get in there, and then you outwork everyone. You know more than me, but I'm gonna outwork you. You're not gonna outwork me, and I'm gonna learn faster than you. And so those are things that I could control. And by the time it was over, everybody said they picked you, the other kids.
Yeah.
And so it's every time I learn a lesson, I keep applying the lesson. And so I have the most diverse, I've gone from private sector to public sector, to home building for a public company and construction, to the NFL. And that is the most non-traditional way to get there. And so now that I'm there, I look for non-traditional people on my team. And I think, that's the important piece. You don't have to know about sports, but do you have a love for technology? Are you passionate about your life, your career? And those are the things that I look for when I'm actually looking to bring somebody to align with me.
I want to stay on that theme for the last question. There are kids in this audience here, and I want you to tell us what are the challenges that that kids out there face to get from where they are now to where you are potentially, and how should they overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think ultimately, kids. One of the biggest, areas of concern for me is that when people get into organizations and they climb and they get these amazing experiences, they just huddle it for themselves, right? They don't think about how is this going to look 5, 6, 7 years? What have I done? I think at some particular point in your career, you start to look at impact. Right? What have I done? Okay, I'm fine, but what have I done to really help continue this momentum for others? And what I will say is, if you are passionate about it and you get an opportunity, learn as much as you can, read as much as you can. Some of the biggest enablers for me were books, because people wouldn't teach me, but there were some smart people that put them in books, and so. And that's why I follow that pathway. And you'll have people tell you. I had teachers tell me what I could and couldn't do, and then I had teachers that were just extremely valuable to me. And I think ultimately, just like anything else, you got good attorneys, you got bad attorneys, you got good doctors, you got bad doctors, you got good, and so ultimately that flows through every single profession. And I just think keep pulling and fighting for your dreams is number one. Number two, if you see someone that don't be afraid. I always say, when you walk in rooms, don't be intimidated. Don't be scared to ask questions. If you don't understand, ask. Ask. The biggest thing you could do is keep your mouth shut, and feel like you can't ask questions that you need to learn. And there's a lot of kids that do that because they're fearful.
Yeah.
And I would say I was one of those kids, right? And I just happened to learn to do that through tech. So now I had a computer. So now I could say, hey, I don't understand what you're talking about. And it became a forum for me. And so, and if it's somebody that you want to meet and that you're interested in, and it's something, reach out to them. You never, all you can do is say no. And so, that's it. Just believe in your dreams, and you just really never know. I never ever thought I would be in this role.
Well, we're glad that you're here.
Ever.
Glad you're here today. Yeah. A round of applause for Gary Brantley. Do we have any questions? All right, we've got at least a few in the front here. We do have mics coming around, so if you could just wait for the mic. Why don't we start right here in the second row? There's a mic right to your right. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. So you talked a lot about how the NFL is and all the technology in the NFL. How are you all prioritizing privacy? Because you deal with a lot of biometric data and information that is identified by individuals. Do you have a centralized privacy office or decentralized? How does that work?
No, it's centralized. I think ultimately we're looking at the NFL itself, but also the clubs, like the 32 teams, and really just really focusing on data governance, and also going through the process to be, SOC 2 certified, which I think is extremely important. It gives you that validity. It allows you to kind of stress test what you're doing against frameworks that exist today. And so that's a huge focus for us, especially as we start to move forward internationally. There are a lot of fine implications tied to not having your act together in that space. And so it's a conversation every day. We have a governance model that is in place that also has a team that is evaluating that. And yes, we have so much data that we ingest, that we take. It's actually pretty insane, the amount of data that we have that comes back within the NFL.
Thank you. I'm a privacy officer, so when I heard all of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much information with so many different people and genres and just things. I'm like, how do you all even keep all that information together or prioritize it? So I think that's amazing. And you said a lot of stuff about what you're doing in FY25, in 2025. How are you, if anything, introducing AI to any of that? Yeah, so AI has already been introduced. So one of the great things about the NFL is for years, right, we're in the phase of generative AI right now, but machine learning and AI, the NFL has been doing that traditionally for years. I think right now what the big phenomenon is, okay, now we gave it to people who are non-techie, like the average person can actually use it and apply it, and now it's like creating things, right? And so we started to use it for compliance. So right now in our coaches' booths, we have cameras. Those cameras are watching to make sure that those coaches are complying with the rules inside of there, meaning you're not supposed to bring your cell phone in. You're not supposed to be on the internet doing those types of things. So you'll start to see more of that coming through. It's a huge focus. And from a cultural perspective, my strategy is it's not about replacing humans. It's a complement. It's the machine and the humans. You are a complement because it needs to do the repetitive task. You need to be the thinker. Mm-hmm. And that is the core way of how I'm explaining this. You need to make the core decisions. It's not going to tell you that you need to have this surgery. You have to make that decision to have that. So it'll give you the data to say that it's needed. But at the same time, as a decision maker, you're the one that's going to say, I am going to have the surgery. So I want
I want humans have to deal with the complexity of it. AI will deal with the things to just make you better. It's your superpower. So just look at it like that, right? It's making you better. It's making you quicker, faster. All the things that you saw on superhero type of movies, just imagine you having the ability to now control that. Yeah.
Great questions. Let's go right here in the, well, let me go in the front row right here. This young man, stand up for us.
Yeah, come on.
Here's a mic coming.
Why do you add the chips in the football?
Great question.
Good question. So the chips are in the football for a lot of reasons, right? So the chips in the football and the chips in the shoulder pads really help with positioning. That's number one. So the coaches during the week are able to really see and use that data to say, hey, is this person aligned in the right place like we need them to be? How can we use this data to help you improve your fundamentals on how you block? Should you have made a cut a different way? Another piece of it, how can we help prevent injury from looking at how you're positioned on the field through these data chips? The things that I talked about the Toy Story animations, those are just value adds. Really, you're taking that information that's on the field in the football and also in the shoulder pads to really help improve performance. And that's what I mean when I say the NFL has been using these machine learning techniques for so long. They just weren't visible to the game and to the average person in the public. So that's a very good question.
Great question. All right, let's go right here to the second row. This gentleman. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a great story. I really appreciate it. Big question on player safety. So you mentioned about having some chips in the gum shields, which presumably is to help around head injury and so forth. Can you speak about what you're doing in terms of player safety for the NFL, but also how you're extending that downstream to where kids are playing and that they are also safe, because we want to have more kids playing football?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I'll try to answer that question without violating anything, ultimately, because the player health and safety piece is extremely sensitive. But honestly, I think the work that is going into the helmets, the helmets are as safe as they've ever been, right? The technology that is going into that. If you look at, I don't know if you've seen those big hats that go over the helmet, right? Those caps are to help, prevent impact collision from being, extremely strong. And so previously, you could only use those in, it's fine. Can you all still hear me? No?
Can we get the mic?
This is tech.
I was gonna bring this over for you, but now I probably messed myself up.
No.
Are you back?
I don't think so.
There's one. Thank you.
So that cap was just used in practice last year. Now the players are allowed to wear it during the game. So if you see, it looks a little funky on top of the head, but players can actually opt in to that. So I think, ultimately I think we also have put some really cool rules in place. One of them that went into place this year was a hip drop tackle. And really banning that. So what you see is we're really trying to protect the lower extremities of players. And really, I think the rule changes and the education on how we want individuals to tackle is actually one of the biggest preventative measures. And so we want the players on the field. We want them healthy. And so you'll see rule changes that aid in that. But I will tell you, the technology in the helmets have grown. I mean, if you see what Sean Springs has done, that's actually in the exhibit, and just the technology that's going inside of there to help prevent head injuries is one thing. But I'll say one thing that everybody saw: the training that our health and safety medical teams are, perform is absolutely saving lives. I think you saw that during the Buffalo game a year ago with Damar Hamlin. Right, those guys on that field saved his life. So really having the right medical professionals that are trained. I talked about the replay the medical replay kind of booth up there where you have eyes that are just concentrating on the game to make sure that these players are in optimal condition. All of those combined really help to create a player experience around health that's positive.
Oh man, we have a lot of questions. We have one mic, right? We have another mic? Okay, why don't we go to this side a little bit? Let's go.
No, I'm good.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm back.
Let's go right here in the orange shirt there. It looks orange, yeah.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
With the ever-expansive state of streaming, telecommunications, and cable, do you have an in-house team that sees if there's any copyright infringement with your streaming, or do you sort of outsource that to someone else to monitor?
No, go ahead. You still have more?
And I saw you're from Atlanta, so I just wanted to ask, is JR Crickets or American Deli better?
Man, I love American Deli.
I like JR Crickets, but the right answer is lemon pepper wet mixed with hot.
Yeah. No, I like lemon pepper. I like lemon pepper dry. You know. That was a good question. No, of course that is something that we focus on, which is copyright infringement. I think ultimately, as these deals are being done, these are mega deals, right? That are happening, like hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of a few years for these deals. And as you start to see the landscape changing, people really thought that the NFL was like one of the first organizations to move sports to the streaming platform. And so I think the due diligence around protecting IP, copyright infringement is something that we have a real top tier focus on, and we also have individuals in the organization who are responsible for that as well. Yep. Well, I can tell because some of these questions are very niche and specific. So from misprivacy to copyright. Yeah.
Let's go right here in the front row if we can. Sorry to make you guys come as far as possible with the mics, but this is my vision right here, so. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm a esports coach for a small community college in Columbia, Maryland. So I'm kind of in that leadership sphere. Earlier you talked about the importance of books and influence. And as a leader myself, I actually see that. So what books have you read to kind of maybe practice influence or just get in that mindset?
Yeah, so I'll tell you one of the books, and this is a book that I'll tell you all just because of the crowd. A book that I've been reading that's been very valuable to me is Political Skill at Work, and it's a book written by a very intelligent professor from Stanford, and that book is honestly the gold mine. It's been the compass of my career for years. I don't really tell people about that book. I'm telling you all about it. Don't put the questions on the website. This is only for this group. But that book is really just learning and navigating people. And of course, you have the books like Good to Great, all those books that come out. I'm reading a book, it's called AI, Human and the Machine. I'm just learning about AI as much as possible. Things are changing, and I will tell you, I said this years ago, and it's becoming true. Everybody now is pretty proficient in a lot of the things that I was doing back in the day on computers. Every kid, like most kids can build their own computer and fix it, right? It's a natural language, right? So I always tell people at the end of the day, like it's almost become like English. And I think a couple years ago, I had told people that we would get to this particular point. But I just think doing a lot of research on leadership, and it also depends on where you are in your life and what you're focused. And every book isn't for everyone. And so I think that's something that people have to realize. Everybody might not want to read a transformation book. or might not want to read a book on AI. I just think that it's fundamental to really helping you learn things that you might not necessarily learn from just, or you might not have the ability to talk or interact with someone who can teach you those things. And so if you want to learn some things from Steve Jobs and how he got to where, absolutely read that book. Remember, I'm fascinated with how people defy odds because that's been my life. So I'm looking at how did you do this and what process did you go through? What barriers did you hit? So I think you have to read books that are tied to kind of where you are in life and what you want to learn. And that's the biggest advice I will give you. I'm constantly looking on websites to see what the top 10 books are out there, what the top 10 business books are out there. And I pick and choose based off of what I'm trying to learn.
We've taken up an hour of your time, so I'm going to close it here. But a round of applause for Gary Brantley, please. Okay. And thank you all for being here very, very much. I will stick around for a little bit longer and happy to chat with anyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to seat it or stand in?